It's a pleasure for us both to be here. We signed up for a presentation earlier on, but then wanted to wait a bit longer. But these projects take time. The context of this project, it's a cross project. They are financed by both University of Lausanne and the EPFL, of Lausanne. And it's, you will see that's why we felt also it's probably useful to come both here. Nicola is representing the technology side. I'm representing the labor market side. So the project in itself is very much inspired also from a development that happens all over the world. We currently feel that technology has accelerated since the internet, the smartphone, development of AI. So this is in itself a very good thing, and it's the reason for being of EPFL. It's the world's leader in shaping new technologies. Many things are developed here, and Dario is certainly part of the game. He's developing drones and also spin-offs. So we also have a very positive view on that. The project, it was submitted to cross in a theme of where the theme was resistance. And so we thought, well, maybe we can think about, so what is it in terms of how we work that may change as a result of these fantastic and positive developments in technology, right? Per se, having a tool like this pointer here is better than not having a tool. We've learned that from very early on. But one thing that happens now is that these tools, they become so much like us that we start wondering, will we still be doing the work we're doing now? So that's the setting. So of course, a very, very big setting. And I'd like to sort of frame our project right away now. We're not going to talk about many of or most of the things that you might be interested in. Not about ethics, not about what will actually happen in 20 years' time. What we're going to do here is we're just sort of showing you an approach that we copied a lot, pretty much, to assess what types of jobs will be more affected by changes in computing. And I think there's somebody who would like to come in here and cannot because it's closed. Okay, thank you. I'd like to also make a little bit of a commercial for University of Lausanne. We have a future skills lab that's also trying to address this question in a very professional and applied matter in the industry. That's one person in our team who's doing this. So this is Isabelle Chapuis. She's the director of this future skills lab. And she very much, she's in charge basically of asking the questions that we're answering here. Ines, on the UNIL side, she's a master student, and she worked a lot in developing the algorithms to calculate our results. This is Dario, robotics, Nicola. Antonio just joined us, I think, and he's overseeing results, and then three, Fabrizio, William, and Davide, they also were very influential in this project. Now, what you see from the first side, it's a very unbalanced project, right?
It's balanced, you are smarter, right? Basically, yeah, exactly.
We would need to be. We'd like to think we are, but and as you will see, and Nicola will explain to you, as what we discovered along the way. We started, with big ideas, but we discovered along the way that there's a lot that we can do on the robot side, and what it is, I'll tell you more. So this project is sort of building on a literature that emerged in 2013. So that's the year when a paper was published that said, 47% of all the jobs in the US will no longer exist in 2030. And of course, that's, that is a shock. If 47% of all the jobs no longer exist, the people become unemployed who thought they would be employed much longer. Of course, you always have retirement, but that's more than you can deal with retirement. So this is this paper here. And so what they came up with is a very simple approach that we actually follow quite fairly similarly in another domain. And what they do to ask whether a job can be automated, and again, warning, it's too simplistic. I also think it is. But let me show you what it is. You ask, well, first of all, you recognize that the job is actually a bundle of tasks. So we're called professors, but what we actually deliver are tasks, services. Or maybe we don't deliver them. So jobs are bundles of tasks. So then you can, if you recognize that, then you can go into existing data sources on what kinds of tasks people do on their job, drive a car, repair a machine. And then you ask for every single one of those tasks, can this task be automated from now until 2030? Of course, nobody can answer this question, right? It's not a scientific question. But there are ways. I mean, this question was asked to people in Oxford here. These two people are, Osborne is, I think, a machine intelligence person. And, they got together and they did a sort of a foresight session where they asked, well, what do we think can be automated? And those are tasks which are repetitive, of course, but that's the old view of automation. There are tasks which have to do now with detecting images, with detecting patterns in images. That's a new task, which I myself, I'm really impressed still how computers do it, but that can be automated. Easy. Other tasks, taking a decision in a complex situation which has not been learnable, maybe not so. And then you aggregate this to the occupation, and you say that an occupation can be automated if, now comes the crucial difference, if sort of the crucial tasks, the most important tasks in the job can be automated. And then these two authors assume everything else will basically disappear as well. I'm going to show you a second study that says, well, what can be automated is the task. And if you take away my task of detecting cats on images, I still have other tasks which are, talking to people, communicating, which cannot be automated. That's the result of these two studies. There's a red line in this picture and a blue one. And then there's a horizontal axis that goes from 0 to 100% automobility. So if your job is here, we're almost sure it can be automated by 2030. If your job is here, we're certain it cannot. It will not be automated. We will not be able to automate your task then. And so then the red line is the first, and then so the first authors that do something get to find the stuff. They said if your job has a 70% score or higher, then it will be automated by 2030. That's just an assumption. They could have said 60, they could have said 80. Okay, so this is the set of jobs at risk. This tool needs some work over. And it turns out it's 47% of US employment. So the area underneath it, that's US employment. Now, look at the second authors. They went through it. I'm going to do this without my tool. Yeah. You like it better that way. So it's new. That's why I'm using it. But so Melanie Arndt's said, there's these task jobs are bundles of tasks, so we can also take them apart. And if you take them apart, if you just allocate the things that can be actually automated within the jobs to here and keep the rest here, you get the number 9%. You know, just to say, a lot in these studies depends on your assumptions, and it will in ours. And these studies don't factor in, you know, labor market adjustments. If technology comes, there will be new jobs. If sometimes you need 2 tasks to be good at something, and then you cannot just look at one task and say, okay, that goes to the computer, the other one doesn't. So all those things, they're not taken into account, and they're also not yet taken into account in what we do. But we still felt, you know, this is something that one has done about sort of more general AI, and we'd like to see what this looks like for robots. So, so what we basically do is we didn't go all the way to tasks. The tasks list is really very long. And we have a theory in mind where whatever you can do depends on your abilities. And abilities is something that has, you know, a lower dimension. It's sort of something more aggregate than the tasks. So we have data on human capabilities or abilities. We have established some idea of what machines can do, but that proved to be really, really work intensive. And then we look at which jobs can be you know, performed by robots, and then which abilities and skills help you to be able to keep your job for the longer future, in the future. And this is something we have done. One thing we're working on is then also to say, well, it's very static to say, okay, you're a cab driver, you're pretty much going out of a job. We also want to ask the question, so suppose you are a cab driver, so what is the most resilient job you could do that is within the realm of your reach, of what you actually also already have as abilities? And that's something, you know, that's in the making, that people are thinking about, but we haven't seen yet. And please do not hesitate to interrupt or say if you're not don't agree with things. Okay, what are our data sources? On the human side, we use something that's very, very standard in labor market research, and it's called O*Net. It's a big project that dates back to the 1970s, and since then, basically work inspectors meet regularly to go through all the different occupations, around 1,000, and they say, they assess this in terms of everything. There's one dimension that we'll show here, abilities and skills, but there's other dimensions that say are physical requirements on the job, the actual tasks you do, but they're a bit more aggregated. So this is very fine-grained, detailed knowledge that we use. This is sort of great for assessing the average job. It's not so ideal to have a look at a specific job of a person. Why? Because these are average assessments. And you know, the typist in one firm might be typing on a Macintosh and on another one on a PC. Bad example, but you know, the occupations change, and we were not able to take this into account. So that's just a snapshot of the data we have. We show you the job of a chief executive, not because we like it a lot, but it happens to be the first one in the list. It's just the lowest score. But I think what's interesting is that we have this set of abilities. That's something we call abilities, right? Oral comprehension, written comprehension, then expression, oral both and written, fluency of ideas. Seems like it's important. And then what we have for every single one of those, so we have the same list for every single one of the jobs. So that doesn't change. That's a fixed list of total 88 skills. But what does change by job is what is the importance of this skill. So you need to have the skill, and then it's number facilities. CEOs need to understand the reports of their accounting departments. Or oral comprehension. They need to hear what people say, even though they don't act like they do. Okay, so that's it for the for the first part. I'd like to ask now to Nicola.
Okay.
So I don't see this by any means as a very scientific endeavor. It's like a lexicon of what you have in the jobs. So no, I don't think of this as the atomic skills that exist in the literature, but they are all well defined. And if you read the definition, it's usually one sentence, and you have a clear idea of what it is. And there's measurement instruments for all of those. Yeah.
And then there can be correlations amongst them. So if we want to say, okay, resilience to a certain job is dependent on X, Y, Z abilities, and there is a sort of a correlation amongst X, Y, and Z, so then kind of complicates the maths.
It depends on the index that you use. You'll see we use one that just sums up. But I agree. I mean, the interdependencies, that's one thing we'd still like to work on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other question?
Yeah, so it's important for me to understand actually further. So the scoring, you've done the scoring yourself?
On this course that you're seeing in the previous slide, no, they're in the database. They're in the ONET database, which is, by the way, freely accessible online, so you can check it out. And it's, I guess it's, you know more about this, but I guess it's based on periodic surveys with human resources experts, with the people who work in the specific industries, like how they rate, how important is one skill like fluency of ideas for being a chief executive. I think it's survey based, if I understand.
Because you said these were measurable, so it's interesting if that score comes out of like the natural language recognition, that okay, they're just mapping all the words that HRs are telling them, and scoring frequency of whatever.
I think that's
of ideas, or there is a metric behind it that can say, oh, you're good at fluency of ideas, but you're not, and I am even worse.
I wouldn't know. I think that there's some data come from job ads as well in the ONET, possibly. So it could be job descriptions that, but I mean, we really took this data as given because they're out there, they're in the literature.
Rafael, you said they meet on a regular basis and discuss this, so something is done by hand. Basically, there is no data science behind it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's much data science behind.
No, this is outside and pre-technology. It takes a long time to update.
This is the human part, okay? This is a resource that exists that rates, that lists human skills and abilities and how important they are for doing virtually every occupation. Now, what we were interested in, of course, was measuring how much of this is theoretically now or at some point in the future replaceable by a machine. So we searched for some similar resource listing robotic abilities and possibly assessing them. Now, we very soon discovered that there is no such thing in the literature which is as systematic and as widely used as the OSTARnet database is for economists. So this kind of explains that unbalance, if you want, in the teams, in the two teams that Rafael described. But let's say that we were just on the robotic side trying to make up for the lost time, because we would love to have such a systematic tool, but we don't have it at the moment. So in the end, we decided that the closest thing was actually a listing of robotic abilities that appears in a policy document, which is the multi-annual roadmap of SPARC, which is a European public-private partnership between the academic sector and the European robotics industry. This document is basically, in large part, used to orient the calls in European research, Horizon 2020, and etc., by giving a more or less systematic description of current and desired robotic abilities, so that, for example, anyone who applies for a call can refer to this list and say, okay, I want in particular to develop this set of robotic abilities. But this document describes, let's say, a small group of core abilities that a machine can have, which are defined as configurability, adaptability, motion, manipulation, decisional autonomy, cognitive ability, perception, interaction, and dependability. And then each of these areas is further divided into, let's call them sub-abilities, more specific definitions of how that generic ability can be realized. And again, you can have a look at the full list, but at the end, this document this list has a more or less as a kind of granularity and a number of items that more or less can be considered similar to the list of human skills and abilities that are found in the net data.
Dependability, what does that mean?
Dependability is basically a measure of technical reliability of the machine. So what did we do? First, we tried to match at least a subset of items from the two documents, from the two lists. Now, as you can imagine, these two lists use very different vocabulary and a very different conceptual repertoire. In many cases, the way some robotic abilities in the MAR are defined are really hard to make correspond to something on the human side, because there are some definition, for example, in the dependability area that not coincidentally probably Pierre just asked about. If you read them, they're really technical descriptions of something that applies to a machine, but you really can't make correspond easily to a human. So we tried to make some significant matches. We took the list of skills and abilities in the ONET database and looked for something in the MAR list that had a reasonably similar definition, that could create a match without being too adventurous. For example, arm hand steadiness, the ability to keep your arm and hand in a steady position, your hand in a steady position with respect to the arm while doing some movement. If you read the definitions, can be correspond fairly accurately to what the MAR list calls position constrained parameterized motion for robots. Inductive reasoning, the definition is fairly similar to what in the robotic realm is called observation learning, and so forth and so on. And we managed to create 38 matches that were acceptable without having to make big stretches in terms of definition. Then we took the robotic abilities that we had thus matched to human ones, and we tried to assess them using a scale that is quite commonly used in the technical and innovation literature, which is the assessment of technology readiness levels, basically how far away a technology is from being applied commercially. It goes from level 1, basic principles are observed and reported, and let's say more or less the first 3 levels are about technologies that are still really in a research phase, experimental phase. Then 4 to 6 technologies that are advancing towards at least prototyping, and 7, 8, 9 are the ones that are closest to a commercial application, with TRL 9 supposedly corresponding to something that is ready to be applied or already applied. And then we after having assessed the robotic technologies we were interested in, we basically added this evaluation in the already existing ONET tables in the ONET database to basically compute how what share of the abilities that are key for each job can be automated, and ponder this estimation with this TRL assessment that we had obtained. So basically, for each skill in a job, again, we have the example of chief executives because it's on top of the list. We have basically the share of very important tasks, of very important skills for that job that have a robotic correspondence, and this is multiplied by the TRL value. So basically, obtain a measure of how automatable those tasks are. So in the end, for each occupation, and here we have a couple of examples with one that comes up in the end very much on top of the list of ones that could be, that look automatable in the near future, and one that is very at the very bottom. We come up with something like that, where on the x-axis, okay, you have a list of skills and abilities that are considered for the specific job. And on the y-axis, you have how important that specific ability is for doing that job, again, according to the initial data to the ONET. And then the dotted line also adds another information, which is at which TRL value is the corresponding robotic abilities, meaning more or less in a simplified way, how close that ability is to being automated, to being potentially replaced by machines. So if you take the blue line, the firefighters, who are quite high on the list, you notice that they have some of the abilities that are really key to doing that job, like explosive strength, dynamic strength, strength strength, trunk strength, stamina. They're very high there, and they're very important for the job. And the TRL, the dotted line, also happens to meet them very high, meaning that the potential for replacing these abilities with the robotic equivalent is quite high. While if you pick manicurists and pedicurists, which is occupation then comes up fairly low in our ranking, quite the opposite is true, because a lot of the abilities which have a very high TRL values, who are potentially easy apparently to replace with a machine, they're not that important for doing that job. They appear, these two lines are very distant, meaning that that occupation is apparently still quite safe from automation. So in the end, what we're still doing, what we're completing at the moment, is a ranking of all the occupations present in the ONET list based on, well, in the end we come up with an index that can be considered as the, it's a share of the important skills needed for the occupation that can be done by a robot. It can be considered an index of the probability of automation. And this is the top of the list, how it looks like at the moment. We're still refining the data, so it may change. But you see, in general, you have manual skills, but not just manual skills, also involving some degree of cognitive work at the top of the list, while quite predictably at the moment at the bottom of the list you have a very creative intensive and management intensive occupations. And we also aggregate this data in terms of families, sectors, as defined in the ONET database, and rank them as well. So at the moment, it looks like that jobs in the installation, maintenance, repair sector, architectural engineering, construction and extracting, etc., are, for example, the top 3 positions, while there is a lower share of jobs at risk and a lower risk of jobs being replaced by machines in the office and administrative support, legal occupation, personal care, and service occupations. And what do we still hope to do in the remaining months of the project and possibly in future projects if we manage to carry on this work? We would like to correlate the share of the population. It's a bit easier to do it with the US, but I guess it can be done for the other countries as well, right? Correlate our data with the share of the population employed in each occupation to actually compute who would be most affected by robot automation, because one thing is saying that in a specific sector there is some risk, some probability of jobs being automated, but then it's interesting to see actually how many people this would affect, of course, from a social perspective. We would like to put all our data, all the data we are producing online in an open format, and we're thinking of an interactive website where, in particular, the robotic community, the robotic research community could integrate our data, because as you imagine from this brief description, there is a lot of subjectivity involved, for example, in assessing how developed the specific robotic abilities today, right? There is no systematic survey being done every year as in the case of the OSTARnet database. So we are basing ourselves on literature, on published literature, on patents, and we are annotating each assessment with some backup from the literature. But of course, the ideal thing would be to open up this effort to the whole engineering community so that everyone can go there and assess the abilities that we were not able to assess, review and make different suggestions from the technology level assessment that we had done. So we will put all this data in an open website so that we can pool the knowledge of the wider community. And we really on the applicative side, if you want, of our project, we want to create some sort of online resilience calculator where ideally one person could go and check how much her or his job is at risk of automation, but even more important, how she or he can move the combination of tasks and skills they have in a way that reduces the risks and maybe moves his or her profile in a bit of a safer place where robots and AI systems will take some more years to get before menacing the job. And this is a first sketch of how this could look like, and because this is a last-minute slide addition by Rafael, I would like him maybe to add a couple of comments about it. But this is how we could use the data that you've used in previous slides to offer this kind of calculator.
That's exactly what you said.
Okay. So maybe, if you remember this slide, If you remember these slides, the idea, I guess, would be, okay, I have this profile that currently is here, and I have some skills that have already been reached somehow by automation, by robot. But I also have some other ones that are still in this area, still far away from the dotted line. And so maybe if I develop those ones a little more, and if I repackage my set of skills, then maybe I can access an occupation that is not too far away from my current skills, but is safer from automation than my current one is. So that would be more or less the idea of this, which once again could be an online tool that we try to develop as a prototype and then hopefully find ways to develop further, because we feel that it would be potentially very interesting, for educators, policymakers, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess that concludes our presentation. So thank you very much for your attention, and we are still open to many questions.
So, of course, we ask ourselves, okay, at the end of these complex things, what is the validity of this value that you produce at the end? And since it's about the future, nobody knows. But what if you do it 10 years ago? If you do it backwards, like you take to compute a dotted line, you take the state of robotics literature and robotics patent 10 years ago, you predict will jobs will have disappeared by today, and we check if they have disappeared or not. That would be kind of a backward validation, because there is no possibility of a forward validation unless we wait for 10 years.
We had actually thought of that at some point, and using historical data to validate our method. Not sure we will be able to do it within the limited framework of this project, but it's definitely something we had thought about, we would like to do, and if we manage to find a way to carry on this project beyond this year of funding that we have, I think it's definitely something we would love to do. Yes.
There would be an automatic way to identify a task description in some text, or is there a special linguistic form for describing a task? Let's think of a job offer, for instance, where it says you should be able to clean the floor, clean the windows, or action verbs with something behind, or because here part of the things you did is to hand annotate your corpus. So
yeah.
What do you think? What is la règle sous-jacente? What is the pattern that the hand coders apply to identify a task? Could we automate this? Because then you could also analyze stuff from 10 years ago to look for task descriptions.
Yeah, you mean in the ONET database, in the human existing database? Once again, I'm not sure, honestly, if some kind of automation already exists, if some language analysis is done, like on job ads, etc., to come up. I think so, to come up with those, with this kind of. Well, now in the slides you don't see the description of the tasks, but of course, if you go to the website, you can find 2-3 lines descriptions for each of them, for the skills as well, for the tasks, etc. I think that some kind of analysis is done. I know, for example, that the Frey and Osborne paper, that the 2013 one that Rafael mentioned, that kind of started this literature, it made some limited use of language analysis on job description, just exactly to come up with something like that. So short answer would be yes. I think it can be done, and it's an interesting way into the problem. Can be done at least partially, Yep.
I can see exactly where this would be helpful in helping people identify future, perhaps transitions or transversal career paths that they can use. But I do a lot of work with companies, and one of the big problems is that professions are hybrid already today. So if I look at your legal professions, it was actually really low, which was surprising to me, because there's big swathes of the legal profession which are actually already being robotized. So I'm just curious whether in your research you did any, or uncovered any insights on mindsets, and how do we help people with the sort of human-robotic interface?
Well, okay. For example, the example you mentioned about legal, of course, we know that a lot of, let's say, low-level legal work is actually being automated. It's an example that is often quoted, and in this case, of course, it depends on how much in the sector, how much weight, let's say, high-level jobs end up having on the data. That is something that you could maybe solve by looking a bit more deeply into the data and assign possibly diverse weights to the various occupations. And other than that, yes, of course, that's a big problem related to how tasks are actually bundled into jobs and making this analysis more complicated than it may seem. I think Rafael mentioned it in one of the earlier slides. I mean, of course, there is some degree of simplification, which is necessarily at least to create a framework. You know, basically here we were really trying to create a conceptual and methodological framework to address a problem that is multidimensional, very complex, and that even in the successful literature right now, like in the case of the paper by Frey and Osborne, which had a lot of media coverage and is very much highly cited, in the end it is based on a I would say on a even higher, much higher degree of simplification, possibly. So we were trying to add more dimensions to the problem, but of course not all of them. Yeah.